easier to meet your students where they are, basically. And then the challenge is you lead with a problem, which is highly engaging. Some of you mentioned that when you're talking about the powerful learning experiences you thought about, the challenge of carrying out a procedure and something that you wanted to learn how to do. And then often there'll be a moment. So you're not really leading as we are today, ironically, talking about things, but you're leading with a problem and letting students engage with that. And then failure, which leads to, in other words, they're trying to do what you ask them to do, but they just can't figure it out. They're stuck on something, and that creates this magic moment called a time for telling. That's the time that you can begin to model for them and coach. This is how I'm thinking about it. And then they're very much more receptive and more likely to remember that and can put it into use right away. And the third feature, so authentic problems, making thinking visible. The third critical component is to make it interactive. And so as opposed to active, I like the word interactive, and I'll explain what I mean by that in the next slide. So there's a learning scientist very well regarded in the field, Mickey Chi at Arizona State, who a few years ago, there's this colloquial term that we all use in education called active learning. And as a scientist who studies this for a living, she was very frustrated by the term because it's not very descriptive. What does it mean exactly? It's hard to study something when people are calling it active learning when it means so many different things to different people. So one of the things that was really useful that her team developed is this thing called the ICAP framework, and I'll walk through what that means. It's an acronym, but it's a really useful tool for just walking to any learning environment. You don't have to say anything. You just observe what's going on, and you have a rough assessment of how deep and transferable the learning is. And so this theory, which I'll go through right now, thank you, is both anchored in years of learning sciences research, but has also been used as a theory to the data has suggested that it is hold true, basically. And it's a probabilistic thing. You're looking at each individual student and you're saying, are they in the I, C, A, or P mode of cognitive engagement? And I leads to the most deep and transferable learning. P leads to that knowledge that's inert, gathering dust in the attics of our mind. And so if you go into any learning environment and just look, if passive would be, okay, people are paying attention. Let's say somebody's giving a lecture, they're looking in the direction of the lecturer. If they're on Hulu or Amazon shopping for something, they're not even paying attention. They're not even on this chart. But if they're at least paying attention, but they're not doing anything physical, that's considered passive. If they are doing something physical, which includes, by the way, writing, or in this case, manipulating a pipette, that's one step up. It's called, in Mickey Chi's terminology, in the ICAP framework, that's called active learning. It's not the same as what we typically use, the colloquial term for that. The next up the chain is constructive, which is when an individual is taking information that was given them and going beyond it. So if you ask students, you're in a lecture, let's say, and you say, okay, I have talked to you about three different concepts today. Draw a concept map that links those concepts together with other things that you already knew before today. So you go on beyond it, or you give them a problem. What's the solution to this problem? Or what are the possible solutions or possible approaches or differential diagnosis, whatever. So you ask them to do something beyond the information that was given. That's constructive. And then the highest level of learning happens when you're in the interactive mode of cognitive engagement, which means that two or more people are being constructive together. They're constructing information beyond what they're giving, and they're doing it on top of each other's ideas, kind of a yes and approach. So that's what I mean by interactive. And that's sort of the goal that we want to set up our learning environments to help ensure that happens. So think about the last time you were teaching a learner. Um, I think just pick one moment again, get that active in your brain. What mode of ICAP do you think they spent most of their time in? And if you all could put a answer in your chat, and if that would be great. There's not been a lot of action in the chat room, so I would love it if you all uh, contributed a little bit so we can learn sort of how you're thinking about things. I'm trying to move you up from the passive mode to active, or even constructive in this case. Lucas, when you were in the memory that you shared with us, how would you have classified yourself? Ah, here we go.
I think I guess during the scaffolding period, I was active because I was kind of physically doing the steps of the procedure.
Yep. And perhaps between sessions, after you had watched the expert do it, you might have asked some questions and built on the knowledge that you had before that session and after that. So you might have been in some sort of constructive building on that knowledge. And you can actually have interactive mode with the instructor as well, as long as you are authentically kind of building knowledge together. So we got a few answers coming, and thank you all so much. Spencer, let's see, oh wait, Holly said precepting one student and three residents yesterday, lots of active time taking care of patients and some generative time applying what we talked about to a new patient. Excellent. Um, and Spencer said last night helped a fellow intubate, providing feedback during the procedure and movements very interactive. Um, and then, so tell me more a little bit about that, Spencer. In what way was it interactive? Was this person, you were having an exchange back and forth and they were learning more through that exchange?
Yeah, because we've got like the video and we can see where they're going. And so like, okay, move it this way, go that way, do this, do that. Um, and and I guess in some ways there wasn't a lot of like verbalization back to us, of like, is that helpful or not? But you could see her moving and see, her getting closer to the right spot.
Great, thank you. Um, let's see, constructive, I would say as I'm teaching learners point of care with guidance. Okay. And then Marcy mentioned Socratic questioning to assist moving from passive to active, perhaps even constructive. If you're asking a question that's helping them link what you were talking about to things that they've experienced in the past. And thank you for explaining what US was to a non-clinician. All right, thank you all so much for participating. Let's go on to the next one, but it's useful to sort of exercise ICAP. And here's what it looks like. This is a class, this is a thing that I call the problem solving suite that I developed in engineering 10 or 15 years ago, back in the days when most people were still lecturing. This is back in I'm sorry, 2005-ish, 2008 timeframe. A traditional environment on the left is you're putting everyone in a passive mode. And unfortunately, the way we're structured today with Zoom, it's difficult to break out of that. But that's also the challenge of Zoom. But it has a lot of pros as well. We're all able to be here together. But in this particular environment, what I did instead was abandon lecture before there was much talk about the flipped classroom at all. This is back in 2005, 2008. And I gave them what I ended up doing is having them each two people because there's no place to hide. You have to be interactive, otherwise you're kind of letting down your partner. And we gave them a big pad of paper instead of an 8.5 by 11, so that they knew they were supposed to be working together. And that pad of paper oddly made a lot of difference. And then we would have what are called skilled participants, a student who took the class earlier, a year or two before, and is there.
Hi, I'm Sandy, a Wayfair product specialist. Love
Uh-oh.
it. The sleek black option. So you can pick and choose the one that best suits your
If
style.
we can mute people. Everyone mute if you're not talking. But anyway, sometimes it's helpful to have older students in the place because students feel more comfortable sharing with them, and they also remember things, how to explain things better because it's still new to them. So this is just one example of an environment that's trying to implement these principles. Okay, next slide. I think this is going to be Holly. Yeah, so obviously many of us, many of you are teaching in the clinic. And so Holly, if you want to say a few words about what that might look like.
Sure. How many of you are familiar with the 1 minute preceptor model? All right, one of my favorite things is when people are not familiar with something so that I get a chance to teach you something. So I think you might recognize it as I start to talk about it. So again, I teach in the ambulatory environment. This is definitely built for that, where we usually only have about 1 minute because we need to get back in the room and take care of the patient. There's other models for clinical teaching. So many of you are teaching clinical skills like at the bedside, taking care of patients. And I'll say that I'm going to use an example that involves suicide. So I always like to give that warning to people because it's is the example that I'm teaching about. So if I was seeing a teenager in clinic, as I was yesterday, I could say to the learner, the first step in the 1-minute preceptor is just to get a commitment, to ask them what do they think is going on. I think most of us who teach clinically do this pretty naturally. But I think what we also then often do is interrupt them as they start talking if we are not always agreeing with what they're saying. So the second step is to probe for supporting evidence. What findings led to your conclusion? So even if their conclusion is incorrect, yesterday, to let them keep going and to probe for their supporting evidence before you immediately give corrective feedback, because it may be that what they think is going on is not aligned to what you think is going on with your experience taking care of patients, but there's something in how they got there that is really helpful that you can build upon when you're giving them feedback. So again, in my example, we screen all of our adolescent patients for suicide risk because that's part of our guidelines. And a general rule I find myself teaching all the time is that it's important to do that because approximately 30% of adolescents with suicidal thoughts will be missed if you only administer a depression screen. So again, this is something that comes up over and over and over. So I suspect you will have teaching tips like this that you will get into your back pocket because you find it's a general rule that people are consistently missing that you're going to give corrective feedback on. You always want to make sure to give an opportunity to reinforce what was done right. So in my example, saying to the resident working with me, I really liked how you explained the confidentiality to the adolescent with the parent in the room, but then making sure to correct mistakes. So next time, make sure that you let the parent and the adolescent know that self-harm is not something that we can keep confidential before we excuse the parent, so that when we do need to have these very sensitive conversations with teenagers and their families, the adolescent isn't surprised that something that they shared with us confidentially is something that we're going to share all together. So again, the 1-minute preceptor, truly, I think it took me just 30 seconds to go through that with all of you, is really, really quick. And if you can keep those 5 steps in your mind, I find that it is really helpful to get people into that, at least that generative mode, if not that collaborative mode, so that you are really having that back and forth dialogue and helping them to construct their knowledge. All right, Joe, I think I'm back to you.
Okay. So this is just to open up the floor for a couple of minutes and invite you all to think about what your role as an educator here is at Emory, whether it's in the clinic or in the classroom or elsewhere. Is anyone willing to share? I would invite you to share what your kind of learning experiences you're hoping to design for your learners. A chance for a free consultation with this room of very wise people, or just to share what your hopes are. Um, but I would say, as you reflect on that, the goal here is to design powerful learning experiences as opposed to, let's say, transmit what you know. That doesn't work as well. So what we want to do is figure out how can we create something that where people will learn and have a powerful learning experience that, like all of us have experienced from time to time. Any thoughts out there? Trying to Keenan, Whiteside's bots, trying to increase interactive opportunities. Students seem used to, yes, they are very used to being passive in the classroom. I've heard some folks say that they don't want to answer questions or don't feel comfortable. Can you say a little bit more about, so are you in the classroom and
I am. I teach the physical therapy students. And so we are working a lot on trying to help them collaborate with ideas to create and generate interventions and like iterate on each other's ideas to make them more interactive.
yeah,
And just sort of struggling sometimes with, we've set preset groups. So when they have to get into groups, we don't have to waste time with students finding what group or who they're going to work with.
yeah,
But if we do the same kind of share out every class, I feel like it becomes less engaging. So I'm trying to think of different varieties of ways to have those interactive experiences so that it doesn't start to feel like, oh, we're in groups again. Oh, we're doing this thing again.
yeah.
But they've responded well when we have made it more interactive. So I just want to think of different ways to be interactive instead of always doing it the same way.
Yeah. I can share a couple of thoughts, but see if Holly or others in the room have thoughts as well. First of all, like this concept's called the jigsaw and the oh boy, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called, but you can have one team in the middle doing what you're asking to do, and there's team on the outside observing, and everybody has a role. And so the folks in the middle are doing what they're doing, and the people on the outside are observing and are going to be asked to make comments and perhaps give feedback to the team in the middle. That's one thing that could be fun to do. Or you could have debates. You could have some teams working on one thing, another team working on the other, and you kind of debate the approaches that you took. And then the jigsaw is like, if you have maybe you mix up the teams a little bit. The teams do something together, but then they go and jigsaw with another team and share what each other team produced in that time and kind of learn from each other. There's a lot of possible ways to do it, but I love that you're asking them to do something creative together and report out what they did. There is a lot of I do like that you keep them in stable groups in many ways. There's many advantages to that because they get more comfortable with each other and more comfortable being vulnerable with what they don't know. But at the same time, you might also consider take some time for them to reflect on how their team is working, and so forth. So there's just a few ideas off the top of my head. Holly, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. How to get our students to be less passive.
I find that starting with those learning environment things that we talked about at the very beginning can really help just getting people willing to think and talk out loud. Because I do teach about adolescence, one of the things I use as an icebreaker is I show a very embarrassing picture of my own adolescence that usually sort of gets all of the funny embarrassment out of the way, and if people are willing to share stories. So I think making those personal connections just really helps in terms of creating the environment. I think your question around whether people will start to get used to whether you're doing like a think, pair, share, or work in a small group and then share out, which is another like larger version of a think, pair, share. I think that really does start to get repetitive for people, and even sometimes people may predict it and then they may be doing something on their own in a very passive mode while they're waiting for their turn to share. And so I would encourage you, and I can look for some in the chat while Joe is going on, to look for other active learning models on some of our educational resources. One I really love is MedEd Portal, which I'll put a link to in the chat, which is a series of published things in health professions education that people can use. And the other thing I've been using a lot is AI. We can use Microsoft Copilot within the Emory Firewall, and that's really important if you're going to be using anything that actually is protected, either patient or learner data. But if you're just asking a question, like give me 5 ways that I can, make a session with these learning objectives interactive and make sure each of them is different, then I have found that that's a really great way to generate some techniques to use in the classroom.
Right.
Just a couple of comments about the learning. So I actually have a variety of learners which range from volunteers all the way to interventional cardiology trainees. And this happens in different scenarios. It could be in the cath lab, it could be in the coronary care unit, or it could be in the clinic. So one has to use different sort of methodologies for the learners in different settings. And with the type of learners you have. So for volunteers, showing them something unique and teaching them and providing them audiovisual sort of way of learning, it sort of stimulates them and think more about that particular area and pique their interest into that. To people who are already committed and are in the program, for example, saying internal medicine. So teaching in the CCU would be to sort of provide them and stimulate them by giving them scenario regarding a patient they're presenting, and then trying to prompt them to come up with an answer about what they are seeing, and trying to help them look at it, analyze it, and if they are not able to come up with an answer, provide them few other things as like multiple choices. Do you see this? Do you see this? Help them. And the whole idea is to help them analyze themselves and come out with an answer. I think that helps them retain whatever they are seeing, uh, and apply that in the future to a very sort of seasoned learners, like an interventional fellowship, uh, where they actually learn by doing stuff, being in the coronary arteries, using tactile stimulation, how they feel with the wire and or balloon and a stent. So those are the different methodologies you can use from a range of learners, which are there. And you can actually provide them sort of an open learning environment and be open about whatever questions they have, and make them feel um, at ease so they can ask you and not just be like, very authoritative uh, in the learning process, and actually engage them in this. I think that helps this whole learning process.
Oh, thank you so much. Beautifully, beautifully said. I think that is a challenge so many of us have, where we actually have multiple levels of learners, particularly if we're in the clinical environment, but even in the classroom, where you can have people with really different prior experiences. And so knowing their experience, knowing what is interesting to them, where they want to take their learning that day. And then one of my teachers would always say, the person who's doing the talking is the one doing the learning. And I heard that very much in what you were saying, right? That having them talk to you about what they're getting out of it, how they're even like feeling the wire when they're doing the procedure, is how you really know what they're learning, and then are there to provide that guidance and feedback. So that was beautifully said. Thank you.
Trying to catch up with the chat here.
Mhm. I think we are hoping, Joe, since Lisa's joining us about 11:15, to just
Yep,
share
moving.
points, some details about what's happening with ed transformation. And then I have a few slides about ways to get involved. It sounds like so many of you are already really involved in teaching, but we have some other ways to get involved. So I think we'll go on to that now, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm just going to brief overview on the education transformation project, which in some ways began a few years ago, was kind of put on hold during COVID, but there was a big effort 2 years ago with about 100 faculty, staff, and students working in working groups, and they produced a report with some aspirations and goals and so forth. And at that point, I started working with the program directors and meeting with staff and faculty and students in each of the degree programs in School of Medicine. We developed 6 educational goals that we are actively pursuing. So we can go to the next slide. I'm going to get to those in a minute. But one of the things in that working group report that stood out to me is this vision, which is shown in the form of a diagram where you have the learners on the left and the educators on the right. And there's this desire to find ways to stimulate joy in practice and a sense of belonging. And so that led us to realize, next slide, that in addition to, if you can just, yeah, it's 2 kinds of ways that people think about things, and we're often very much focused on what's called the paradigmatic mode of thinking, scientific, logical, obviously extremely important for healthcare professionals to spend a lot of time developing those ways of thinking, but you don't learn to have joy in practice or a sense of belonging through paradigmatic knowledge. It's more what's called narrative thinking. It's the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves to others, and the stories that we tell about our experiences and the meaning we make from those experiences. So there's a desire to also develop that mode of thinking, and for the very, not only is it good for you, for our students to think about who they're becoming and what and make sense of the experience they're having, but it's also by developing those skills helps them connect with their patients and have more meaningful relationships with their colleagues as well. So next slide. So that led to these 6 education transformation goals. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's 3 flavors. One is we need a strong foundation if we're going to be innovative in education. And part of that has involved, we created a group called Chime that has education experts in it. We'll introduce you to some of those individuals in a couple of slides. The second flavor is transformative learning experiences, both in the paradigmatic or scientific logical way of thinking, as well as in the narrative ways of thinking. And then the third flavor of goals is how do we help our students have as big an impact and positive impact on the world as possible, both by learning how to work with others in different disciplines and so-called collaborative practice, but also how to learn how to be innovators and advocates and reform leaders. And next slide. So those are our big goals that we are pursuing right now. And I will just say a quick update. The ECC and the MD program approved about 2 weeks ago that we are going to redesign the first 18 months of the MD program under the principles of cognitive apprenticeship, moving more towards case-based learning, where we're centering patient cases and everything that we are asking students to do. That's a very exciting initiative. The physical therapy program is completely redesigning their curriculum, and the physician assistance program is on a slower burn, but they have about a 3-year plan to redesign things. So there's a lot happening in the School of Medicine. It's really exciting. And it's all kind of using these principles of cognitive apprenticeship to drive what we're doing. So I'm going to, I think, turn this over to you now, Holly.
Yes. So I'm just going to briefly, as similar to what you experienced this morning, go over a few slides so you can just get a sense of who some of the people are, should you wish to reach out to them to get involved. And then we will take a quick break before we move on to talking a little bit about feedback. So this morning, you heard from our Executive Associate Dean for Education, Bill Ely, and he is on an incredible team with Marilyn Bond, who is the Associate Dean for Business Finance Administration, Kristen Hairston, who's our Associate Dean for Student Success. So if you have a learner, particularly in one of our undergraduate programs, not undergraduate at the college, but meaning our PA, genetic counseling, PT, et cetera, degree programs, Kristen and her office is really a resource for helping to support everything from tutoring skills to career counseling to getting students connected for personal counseling if that is needed. And then you've heard from Joe this morning. Within the MD program, many of you will be teaching medical students. Just wanted to give you a sense of the many people involved in directing and supporting that program there. From Ira Schwartz, who is our Associate Dean for Admissions and provides a additional level of student support throughout their time with us. Stacy Higgins, who is the Associate Dean for the clinical years within Student Affairs. Yolanda Hood, who is our Assistant Dean for Multicultural Affairs. Jordan Churchwald, our Assistant Dean, who supports all aspects of the program. David Schulman is the director for the foundational years. As Joe mentioned, that is where a lot of change is going to be happening in the upcoming year. And then Ty Hinkins-Jones, who is an educational expert who supports the degree programs, particularly with a focus on instructional technology and faculty development. And then finally, here are the actual leaders of the degree programs themselves. So if you are not already connected to one of these individuals and are interested in teaching in our anesthesiologist assistant, genetic counseling, physician assistant, physical therapy, medical imaging, or MD program, I will direct you to these wonderful individuals on the slide here. We're going to be hearing a little bit more about GME at the noon hour when Jamie joins us, but I did want to remind you again that we have lots of opportunities for you not to participate only as a learner for your own continuing medical education, but actually to participate as a teacher. So if you are interested in offering a CME course for credit, I encourage you to reach out to the CME team, several of whom you will see pictured there. They are able to support you in the design of your CME activities, to walk you through the process of offering CME credit. for activities, as well as to support you in MOC Part 4 credit for those of you who may be working more in the quality improvement space. And I'll remind everybody, as we said this morning, to please sign up for your own account so that the CME office can easily track your credits that you accrue learning here at Emory through various conferences, as well as grand rounds, tumor boards, and things like that. So there's many, many ways to get involved. So many of you are already teaching. I'd love to see all of the ways that you all are already teaching in the clinical environment and in courses. Lots of opportunities to offer CME as well, opportunities to precept in the outpatient environment. For those of you who are also researchers, there are lots of opportunities to mentor our students in research projects. In particular, our MD students have a research requirement, and so we're always looking for more physician scientists who are interested in mentoring in that program. Quality improvement projects, mentoring other junior faculty, residents, and then serving as a small group advisor, which is a role within the MD program where students are paired with a small group advisor in a group of about 8 students throughout their entire time with us. And then finally, there are leadership opportunities as well. These will all be sent out as they become available on the faculty digest and faculty huddle that you heard about this morning, but there will often be opportunities for new leads of various programs, various clerkships. I think right now the curriculum committee that Joe mentioned is looking for new members, so that is a great way to get involved if you're interested in getting more involved in the undergraduate MD programs curriculum. And then lots of electives as well. So again, I won't belabor some of the names of the individuals. I'll make sure that you all have access to all of these slides so that you know who to follow up with some of these things if I've piqued your interest. And then finally, wanted to make sure everybody knows about our Ready to Teach website, which you can access here with this QR code. Specifically for the MD program, this is a set of teaching resources that will let you know when a student shows up from that program on your clinical rotation, where your clinical environment, where you're working, what are the learning objectives for that experience, and then also how do you support them, how do you assess them, how do you refer them if you're concerned about some aspect of how they're doing personally or professionally. So that website is available to you. And then finally, as Joe mentioned, we have the Center for Humanizing Innovations in Medical Education, or CHIME. These are also an incredible resource to you. We have Dr. Nikita Chavaria, Dr. Christy Wilson, and Dr. Ilimu Luhanga, who are all educational experts and available to help you with some of the questions you all have been asking around, how to transform your classroom or clinical environments. And so they are really there for you to meet with you and assist you as well. And with that, I think I've left us all of about 3 minutes for a brief stretch. So feel free to just take a brief moment.
Sure. Okay, are we good to go here?
We are.
All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see at least many names out there. New faculty joining. I know some of you may have been Emory trainees. I know, shout out to our couple of our dermatologists out there. Excited to see your names in these new roles here. I am Dr. Jamie McElfresh. I am a dermatologist and dermatopathologist by training, but I'm coming to you in my role from the Graduate Medical Education Office. I am aware that you have been on Zoom for a long time. So this is a quick presentation and hopefully gives you a few useful things. I actually remember myself, my faculty orientation from quite a few years ago. It was in person. I admit I don't remember a whole lot of the details, but I remember a few pearls of things people said. So I hope from this you'll have a couple of things related to teaching and the graduate medical education space that you can take away from today. And it's brief, so you will be on your way soon. So let's start with a couple of things. So really for today, I know that you have been on Zoom for a long time and may not have a whole lot of more mental capacity left. So I just thought, what if you could accomplish a couple things from this talk today? And that would be, what if you knew the overview of what GME looks like at Emory?
Whether you've been a trainee here, it may still look different on the faculty side, or if you're brand new to Emory and Atlanta, certainly give you a perspective of what's going on here. A little bit about our mission in GME and how it can play a role for you as a faculty member, and then importantly, some examples of ways you can get involved, how to contact us in general, and then little parting words about the value of serving as an educator in GME as in your faculty role. Okay, so starting out, our graduate medical education office is a decent sized office, but you will frequently see the names of me or Dr. Philip Shane, who is in emergency medicine. Every graduate medical education sponsoring institution has somebody designated by the ACGME as the designated institutional official, meaning the main person responsible for all of the training and training programs across the institution. That's Dr. Shane. And he and I work closely. I'm the associate DIO and the assistant dean of graduate medical education. So we're a two-part team. And if you hear from either one of us, that's where we're coming from. We work with a big team of folks. Here's a couple of faces and names. I think you've already heard from Dr. Harewood earlier in her role in general at the FSAP office, but she has previously served and is serving while we're looking for somebody new in a role as our GME psychologist. For those of you who have positions at Grady, you may interface with the Emory at Grady Dean's office and Dr. Jason Leapsite, also from emergency medicine. And then if you do anything in an actual official role in GME as an associate program director or otherwise, you'll definitely hear from two of our key players, Tawana Daniels or Junli Zhao, our director and associate director of GME. But we have more than 10 staff members here to help you along the way if you get more involved, and you'll learn their names as that time goes on. So really, importantly, what is our mission and our vision? And this is at an institution level. It's to train physicians who will improve health care in Georgia, the US, and internationally. And ideally, be a leader in innovative graduate medical education practices by developing exemplary physician leaders. What does this mean to you? And what does it mean to us really on a day-to-day basis? We think engagement in teaching our residents and fellows improves patient care now and for the future. Education, and some of you who've just come out of training, hopefully you felt at times that your roles, or many of the times that your role as being part of the team, elevated the care of the patients you're taking. You were a part of the care of at that time, and now in your new faculty role, if you're just finishing training, you'll see this from a different light. Education and a role in education can be definitely a focus of personal career development. So I know you've heard from the undergraduate medical education side of things, and the same is true for the GME side. And then, of course, we're biased, but we think engagement and education is generally rewarding and fulfilling. So some about Emory GME by the numbers, 1467. We always pick a day each year where we benchmark how many trainees we have across the institution. It varies by a few here and there because programs start and end at different times or people are leaving occasionally. But 1,467 is our total number of residents and fellows across the institution for this year. 122 is the number of ACGME accredited programs that we have. That's about 30 residencies and 92 fellowship programs. The 30 residencies, even though that number is smaller just because of their size, like internal medicine, that's still the vast majority of our trainees are in our residency programs. Greater than 50 is the number of programs that are only offered at Emory across the state that other programs, other sponsoring institutions don't have. So you only uniquely get that training here. And then in addition to these accredited programs, there's 100 other non-ACGME fellowships of various sorts, tending to be small niche entities. And some of you all may have come out of one of those or may participate in those going forward. So what does that mean? It means that basically across the country, we're one of the 15 largest GME organizations that exists. And roughly have over 50% of the trainees and programs throughout the whole state of Georgia. Where might you see these trainees? So certainly everybody here on this call will be working at different sites. Some of you may be working at a couple of sites yourself. Our trainees are scattered across 78 training sites total, but really, when it comes down to it, the bulk are at these individual areas you see with this pie chart. So about 40% of the trainees have accredited time to spend time at Emory Healthcare. That doesn't mean obviously that they're only at Emory Healthcare, but 40% of our positions are allotted to Emory Healthcare, and that can be Midtown, Johns Creek, Emory, Maine, etc. Another about 30% are at Grady, and then you see the breakdown from there. Another 15% or about 220 at CHOA. The VA has about 129, and then there's a variety of other funding sources independent from our hospital sites. So basically what this means is no matter where you are, you're likely to see one of our 1,400 plus fellow residents and fellows and be engaged with them, whether it be in the office, in the hallways of the hospital here, or a clinic or other site that you are. So how can you get involved? You will certainly be working with them day in, day out in some cases, but how else strategically can you get involved? Let's start first with the department level. Clearly, if you have a resident or a fellow with you in clinic or in the hospital or in radiology or wherever you are, pathology, then clinical teaching will be something you're engaged in. It's sort of a given that we know how to do that, but there's definitely skills to be developed in that space. And in particular, a reminder to be engaged as well in the resident or fellow feedback and evaluation. That can be in a formal setting or through just giving them feedback in real time. You can also be a mentor to resident fellows, whether that's in the clinical space or in a research or scholarly project venue, or in global health or other sort of projects that might be going on. You could participate, of course, in your division or department's resident or fellow didactics. Every department and division has an education committee, so that's another way to get involved. There's interviewing and recruitment activities, which are starting or happening now and continuing on through the end of the winter. You could also be a site director for your clinical site and engaged in the education space in that way. And then, of course, serving as a residency fellowship director or an associate program director are some of the many ways at the department level you could be involved. Beyond the department, there's things at the School of Medicine level and beyond that you could also engage in. So we in GME have a variety of committees. Typically, those engage those who are already connected to our residencies and fellowships, maybe the associate program directors or the program directors, but a few of them exist outside that space. We also have some training programs that exist across all of our trainings that we frequently engage people just for these. So we have a chief resident training usually in the spring. And that's, if anybody knows Emily Pinto, she runs this, and it's a great place to present if you're interested in leadership and engaging in that way. We have a patient safety workshop that happens in the winter, and any of you who've been a trainee, I'm sure were a part of that at some point. And so that's a place, if you have an interest in patient safety, where you could be a facilitator. And then if you just have a general area of expertise that would apply to multiple programs, we're always looking for speakers to provide faculty or resident development across all the programs. I'll talk in a moment a little bit more about the GME tracks, so I'll save that for a second. And then national organizations, you can be involved in that way too. Many of them have education-specific different societies or work groups, portions of the organization that you can join in. I've listed some of the national like ACGME and AAMC, the education focused ones, but certainly your specialty would have some of those as well. So this is where it would be, if we were in person, I could have you all raise hands, but at the end of the Zoom day, I'll just leave it as is. So just wanted to highlight one particular special place that could be an area of engagement, and these are what we call the residency or residency and fellowship tracks. These are 8 specialty tracks that are unique to Emory GME and were started here, although I think some other large institutions may have something somewhat similar. And these allow residents or fellows to gain knowledge and skills across certain focus areas that are outside of their discipline. And I know one of our new faculty members participated in one of these. So what they range from 12 to 24 months. Typically, they have sessions that are in the evenings that allow the residents to join, and some of them have action projects or other things. And this is a place that you could be involved. As I show you the topics here, if you have a special interest in one of these areas, you could become a residency track director or just a speaker. So as you see here, we have a medical education track, an ethics track, and the other ones you have listed. And these are fun, kind of interdisciplinary areas where you can meet other faculty members and then work with residents and fellows across institutions. So something unique to Emory, and I think a nice place to get involved if you wanted just a touch point into all of this, but maybe not a bigger role. If you are in the School of Medicine on the Emory main campus, come by and visit us. We're on the 3rd floor up in Suite 327. You wouldn't see it unless you were looking for it necessarily, but if you happen to be around, come stop by. The email for me and Dr. Shane are here if you want to reach out at any time. We do like to mention here and in multiple spaces that we do maintain this anonymous link for concerns. It's for residents and fellows, but it's for faculty or really anybody as well, that allows you to report something if you have a concern at any point. You can put your name, but it's not required, and that comes to us, the GME leadership, to address. So if you have a concern or have a resident that has a concern that can't be dealt with locally within your department, just making you all aware that that's there. So last but not least, I think there's multiple things that you can do on your path to faculty excellence in the graduate medical education space. Number one is role model. You know, even if you're not specifically teaching those around you, they will see you, they will see what you're doing, and you will be teaching, even if it's inadvertently. From a former program director's standpoint, I was the program director of dermatology for more than 15 years. It is critical to have evaluations of our learners and provide them feedback. And it's always hard to get enough of that, and feels like learners always want more feedback. So participate in that, evaluate your trainees if you're asked to, provide constructive feedback, or just share it in real time verbally. I gave you some ideas, but actively participation in your department initiatives is a way to display your excellence. And for some of you, maybe this will be a career path. I don't know that I would have predicted that that's where I am now, but it's been a joy to be in this space over time. So you can decide to lead in this space, and it's a great career venue, I would say. Mentoring is another way to be on your path to excellence here. And as I mentioned, there's lots of ways to be a mentor, formally and informally, and then enjoy your teaching journey. Your enthusiasm is infectious to those around you, especially those of you who are just graduated. I know you can appreciate the teachers that you had along the way and the difference that made. So, I think maybe on a timely nature, perhaps I'm frozen. Oops. Okay, just closed out. I think, let's see, I think I just had one last slide. Hopefully that one's saying. So a couple quotes to leave you with. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And that you said I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So I think that is fitting for the role of a teacher, especially in the GME resident and fellow space. Probably, as many of you look back on your training, you remember less about the details of the facts you learned, although I'm sure you have excellent training, but you may remember specifically somebody who was really special to you in that time and your mentor and guide through that time. So think about that and think about being that for somebody in the future. If you want to reach out and share ideas, we're always open and glad to meet you all virtually. Excited for our few dermatology new faculty members, excited to have more than one of you. That's a treat. And to the rest of you, say hello if I meet you along the way.
Does anyone have any questions to finish out? I'm going to put them in the chat. It's been a long day, I think, for everyone. Thank you, Dr. McElfresh, for your presentation and for your willingness to start early today. We appreciate it. I'm going to put an evaluation link into the chat for all of the participants. We thank all of you for joining us today and for bearing with our schedule shifts that we've had. And if you could please take the evaluation, give us your feedback. It's really important to helping us improve as we move along. And otherwise, we will be in touch with the link again, and all recordings and presentations will be made available online within the next couple of days. And thank you again for your time and your effort today.